are bright and shiny in my mind. You got me loving, hating, crazy indecision in my mind.
Welcome to the Fall Podcast, where the focus is on deer hunting, tips, tricks, tactics, and stories from across the Midwest. And now, here is your host, Aaron Blasey.
Welcome back. Happy Hump Day, everybody. I am your host, Aaron Blasey, and this is the Fall Podcast. On today's episode, I have a really cool story coming at you from Caleb Byers from Iowa. Caleb Byers is not even 30 years old yet, and he's killed 3 200-inch deer with his bow. Yes, 3. It's just unbelievable what him and his wife do during the fall to get on big deer, and they do it year after year. We also dive into the tactics that Caleb deploys every year going into the season to make sure he's successful. We talk about a 180-inch deer that he passed up, not just any 180-inch deer, a 180-inch 8-pointer that he passed up just to get to another year. It's a pretty cool story about that. We also dive into when is the perfect time to kill does, and Caleb asked me a question about the age structure here in Michigan and where we hunt and how we deal with it or how we're trying to fix it. So it's a pretty cool podcast. I hope you guys enjoy it. Little update here. Recently I put a picture up of a deer that got through on my farm this year. His name's Jeffrey. He is alive and well. He is a 3.5-year-old deer this year, so I'm pretty excited to see what he becomes into. Just the other night, I was out at the main farm and watched 8 different bucks come out of the wheat field into the beans and watched them for a little bit. And I had a deer last year. I don't have him named yet, but he's only got one side, one good side anyway, and the other side just a big spike. He's made it through. He's a 4.5-year-old deer this year, so I'm going to get him named so everybody knows who he is. And I also got 3 other shooters besides the 4.5-year-old and Jeffrey that I got my eye on that I'm going to have to kind of look more into and see if I had pictures of last year. And I'm really excited about it. So lastly, I just want to let you know that the first couple of minutes of this, Caleb's audio on his side was hit or miss a couple times. You can't really understand what he says, just hear a couple times. But I do promise you that it does work its way out, and it's crystal clear audio the rest of the way. Enough with me and what I'm doing. That's just a little update on that. Let's get Caleb on here and listen to these stories about all of his 200-inch deer.
I am natural.
All right, here we are. We're back with another installment of the Fall Podcast, episode 11, and today I have Caleb Byers from Iowa on today. Caleb, how you doing?
I'm good.
Well, good, man. Hey, like everybody, we're trying to get our schedules lined up here, and we haven't been able to in a while. And finally, we got a night to do it, and I'm super excited because, you've done something that I've never heard of anybody anywhere ever doing, killing 3 200-inch deer with your bow. And how old are you now? You're right around 30 years old?
Yeah, I'm 27, and I started hunting at a very young age, but I got into bow hunting when I was 15, so I guess I've only been at it for 11 years as far as bow hunting goes.
So you've been hunting 11 years, but you've killed 3 200-inch deer already.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate, that's for sure.
Well, I want to break down all these deer, but before we do that, can you give a little brief bio about yourself? I said you were from Iowa, but, where you're from, how old you are, and kind of what you do for a living?
Yeah, so once again, I'm Caleb Byers. I'm 27. I'm originally from Marion, Iowa, but for work I moved over to Sheraton, Iowa, and I work at the Sheraton Hy-Vee Distribution Center. So we just recently bought a house north of Sheraton, not too far. So we're excited about. We have 16 acres here, and it's not too far from our main farm, so it's going to be fun to see if we can be able to harvest a buck on just 16 acres. So we're looking forward to that this year.
Cool. And, for everybody that's listening, if you've heard the name Caleb Byers before, you've probably heard it on Midwest Whitetail, right? You've been doing the Midwest Whitetail digital series for a while?
Yeah, I've been doing it since 2014. My wife and I I got into filming in 2013, and I kind of just introduced it to her. I didn't want to do it real seriously to begin with. She wasn't really raised hunting too much. She's kind of been around it, but never really done it herself. So I kind of eased her into it, and see if she would like it, to see if she would like it, and she actually loved it. So in 2013, she actually shot 2 deer on film, and filmed me shoot 2 deer on film, and filmed me shoot 2 deer. So ever since then, we kind of, progressed as we went on, I guess you could say. But so we basically just approached Bill about being on Midwest Whitetail, and they took us in with open arms, and I guess the rest is history, as you could say, because we've definitely built some good relationships with them, and who knows what the future can hold. I mean, we're having a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, for sure, and definitely being able to do it right in your backyard too. I don't think you travel much for hunting, right? You just kind of mainly do it right in Iowa.
Yeah, the farthest we hunt from our house is probably about an hour.
Okay.
We don't hunt very many big properties, but we have, I wouldn't say several, but we have a few. We have a few properties that's scattered, about an hour radius from our house. So we don't travel too far, but it gets pretty tricky when you hunt with kids, though, I guess you could say.
Yeah, definitely. And so you've been doing the Midwest Whitetail thing since you said 2014, right? And you said you really like that. How does filming your hunts bring? I mean, it brings its own set of challenges. Can you explain a little bit of those, and maybe some instances that you had to let some deer walk that you really didn't want to, or just trying to be on the same page with your wife, or even who's filming you, or you're filming someone? What kind of set of challenges does that bring?
Oh, I mean, it brings a lot of challenges. You got twice the setup, and walking in, twice sitting in the tree. Anytime you're hanging a tree stand, I think this is the biggest challenge, because anytime you're hanging a tree stand, you can get one stand in any tree, it seems like, but trying to get to position where you got room for both of you and all the camera equipment is the biggest challenge, in my opinion. And then we've had times in the tree, when you first start out, you're not completely on the same page. We're getting better at it as we go, but it's still, you never stop learning. Every year we learn more and more. And Taylor actually, I was filming her, and this would have been our first year on Midwest Whitetail, 2014. And we had this buck coming in, just an absolute giant, probably mid-180s, maybe a still bigger. And I'm filming as he comes around the tree, and I get to where I run out of room. So I go to swing around the other side of the tree right as she stops the deer, and he's only at 7 yards, so it would have been a chip shot, she's going to smoke this deer. But in the process of me swinging around the tree, and her having to wait, the deer runs off and gets away. So if we weren't filming, that deer's dead every day of the week. But when it all comes together perfectly, there's nothing better. So you don't regret anything like that as far as the filming side of things.
That's crazy, man. And I've been filming in the outdoor industry like you have for the last 6 years, going on 7, and I've been fortunate enough to where I actually have not had to call any hunter off of a deer for anything. For low light, or I just haven't been in that situation, which is really big, because you never want to be that guy that when you're trying to make a TV show that's like, well, I'm sorry, it's low light, or there's too many trees in the way. But fortunately, I have not had to do that.
Yeah, knock on wood, hopefully it doesn't ever happen to you. But it sucks when you could have killed the deer, but the camera saved your life. But there's still nothing better than when everything goes perfectly, because it takes a lot more when you're filming. There's so much more that can go wrong, that when it goes perfectly right, it just makes it that much more sweet. So
Yeah, for sure. I can attest to that. It's even when you're self-filming, because I've been able to kill some deer but while self-filming too, and it's that's so hard. And
Oh,
I
that is
just it,
insanely tough. I've tried it a few times, and it's insanely tough. I don't know how you do it because there's so much going on already, and then you're trying to find out the camera that it almost never seems to work when I do it.
yeah, the last time I did it was in 2012, and I actually took a decoy out with me, and I had a buck come into a decoy, and I'm not gonna lie, it helped out a lot because that buck came in and postured up to him, and he had no idea I was even in the world, and I think that decoy really helped me out because I could do jumping jacks up there, and he wouldn't have known.
Yeah, for sure.
The filming side of things, it brings a lot of challenges, but there's another thing I want to talk about today, and that is, you've killed some really big deer in your lifetime, in your short period of hunting. Actually, you said 11 years. Before we get to that, though, I want to briefly talk about the tactics that you deploy during, the off season and the season, everything, to make sure you're successful every year. I mean, are they pretty repetitive, or are you just trying to switch things up every year? Or, what's your goal? Kind of take us through the summer going into the fall. Like, what's your goal?
Um, Scouting as much as possible, obviously in the summer months and then leading up to season. But I think one of the things that people overlook when they think of scouting is okay, I need to be out there all the time and I need to see what the deer is doing all the time. If you can let your cameras do most of the work and scout from afar, you're going to be way more successful in the fact that, the element of surprise is your biggest best friend when you're hunting a whitetail deer. If they don't know they're being hunted, your success rate's going to be way higher. So I don't get cameras out until the middle of July, but I'm constantly, doing whatever I can to improve my properties. I just got done doing some hedge cutting, so I'm hoping to take a farm that I've actually never even really put any time into, and it just got put into CRP. So I'm hoping with more cover, I did a bunch of hinge cutting and like a CRP fence line, and then there's a main draw that runs through it. So adding more cover to a place that has lots of food, it could be pretty good this year. But and then obviously, in summer months, I'm moving any stands that I, considered unsuccessful the year before, or, they just were 50 yards from being in the right spot. Cutting shooting lanes, you name it. I mean, it's a year-round process, and I'm always constantly trying to think of ways I can have better entry and exit from spots that I know are going to be foolproof, that I know are good every year. And this year, late season is probably one of our most difficult times here for us, just for the fact that we're not capable of leaving a lot of food. We always normally leave like an acre and a half on our farm, and it's kind of hit or miss. I get so picky in the late season. I just have more of a hard time pulling the trigger than actually having a buck that's probably a shooter, if you will. Just because if I've made it that long, I have a hard time shooting them. I got so much crap for it last year, from people on social media and on Midwest Whitetail and whatnot. I passed a 4.5-year-old on a farm that he ended up going 188 inches. I passed him twice in late season, basically for the simple fact that he was such a homebody. I went to our neighbors and I showed him a picture of him. I said, if we pass this buck, one of us is going to be killing a buck of a lifetime next year, potentially a 220 to a 230 if he makes a good jump like he did from 3 to 4. So in my mind, it was still a great decision in my mind, because if he would have, I almost wanted to see what he's going to turn into more than I wanted to kill him. So it was an easy decision, but 4 days after I passed him for the second time, he ended up getting hit by a car, and So the keyboard warriors really had my back after that one. But I definitely don't regret not shooting him because, like I said, just being able to see, I almost enjoy watching them grow from year to year more than actually harvesting them. So, if it would have been the biggest buck of my life, I would have shot him, no doubt, every day of the week. But whereas, got a few deer bigger than him, it was an easy decision not to pull the trigger on him. So.
Yeah, and that's crazy to me because, well, not crazy. I totally understand where you're coming from. I mean, you grew up in Iowa, and I'm not bashing on any Iowa people. I'm not, because you're fortunate enough to be there. You know what I mean? I've got to, last year was the first year I got to set foot in Iowa through a deer season. I wasn't hunting, but I was filming, and it's for lack of a better word, it's pretty magical, honestly. Like it's unbelievable, the deer that you see. And I grew up here in Michigan, and I've killed a couple 3.5-year-olds. I've never killed a 4-year-old, but they've been around that Pope and Young to 130 mark, and that's what we're going for. So it's kind of crazy for me to hear you say, I passed up a 188-inch 4-year-old, but looking at your resume, you have killed 3 200-inch deer. So I do understand why, but it's all relative to where you are as well. I can tell you, if I went to Iowa, being in my situation, that's a deer I just can't pass.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, their comments were, that's not even hunting. If you're only out for killing a giant deer, then that's not even hunting. But honestly, age is what it was all about, because I was hunting a buck that was 7.5, and I ended up killing him like 2 days after I passed him. So my plan actually came to fruition, and I ended up killing the buck I was after. So the thing I did, it made me not look so dumb, for all the people that are saying that I'm an idiot. But yeah, I definitely don't regret the decision. Like I said, just seeing what he would have turned into this year would have made my season, whether I harvested him or not. So you definitely have to be at peace with your decision before you and be okay with whatever happens from then on forward. Otherwise, yeah, you should definitely never pass a deer like that.
Yeah, and like I said, I totally understand why you were doing it. And those keyboard warriors, as you alluded to, you're not going to make everybody happy. So the best thing to do is just do what you grew up doing and what you believe is right. And I mean, in your situation, you made a right decision, because like you said, if you had never killed a deer like that, I'm going to guess you probably would have killed that deer.
Yeah, every day of the week. Yeah, no doubt.
So it's like, it's not that you're chasing antlers, you're chasing a challenge as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
You're chasing a story. You're a storyteller, just like I am, and at the end of the day, you want to fill the freezer as well. But it's a challenge as us as hunters, because I see it here in Michigan on my farms. I'm trying to get deer from 2.5 to 3.5, and when it happens, I'm like ecstatic. You know what I mean? I love that, because and they're only Pope and Young deer, but they're so few far in between here in my area that it's like I what I picture it as is like me killing a 130-inch deer is like you killing a 200-inch deer in Iowa. You know what I mean? Like,
no doubt, yeah.
You've done it 3 times, but it's you've made it look easy, but it's not easy,
Oh, absolutely not. And the thing that people don't realize too is there's you're only out for the antlers. They don't see behind the scenes that I actually shot 12 does last year, and I not only filled my freezer, but I filled my friends and my families, and I also donated some to the Hush program, which is Help Us Stop Hunger. It's a very good program that we have in Iowa. So we always try to donate a few to that, and then, get meat for anyone in our family and our friends that want it too. So
yeah, for sure. And that's another topic I want to talk about is is killing does. I kind of talked about on the last podcast about when is the perfect time to kill does. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say, because I mean everybody's gonna have their own opinion, and that's kind of what I want to know what you do. Do you do it as early as you can? Do you have specific stands that you only kill does out of, or do you do it at late season? What is your plan going in for when you're killing does?
My goal every year is to try and kill them early season. And I will have stands that I will definitely not go into and kill a doe. There'll be times where, okay, we got a cold front rolling in, I'm strictly buck hunting. But say it's like, a warm day, I'm going to go hunt a clover plot, probably, somewhere that I can get into and out of very easily and shoot as many does as possible. But my plan can also change too. Like this last year, it seemed like every time I was hunting a doe, a target buck would walk out, and I'm like, well, I really don't want to shoot a doe and scare him dragging the doe out, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
So then
right.
sometimes your doe mission filters into late season. But the reason I shoot them early is because, for one, I want to get my buck to doe ratio down before the rut. That's basically one less doe that a buck's gonna be walked down with. And
Right.
why make him waste the energy to breed the doe, if she's going to be dead anyway. So
Exactly. Yeah, that's totally, I understand, and I feel like I fluctuate every year, but, with my job and I travel a lot during the rut, I get to hunt the rut sparingly. So I try to gear myself up to kill my bucks like the first couple weeks of October, our opening day.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I've kind of laid off the does, but last year was a little different. I've got two main farms here in Michigan that I hunt. On one farm, I didn't have a target buck that I was even willing to even go after on one of the farms. Nothing that really even excited me. So I'm like, well, I'm going to go in and I'm going to kill a doe. And that's what I did. The first set I went in there and I killed a doe. But on the other farm, I had two bucks I really wanted to go after, and I was like, well, I'm just not going to kill any deer or kill any does on that farm. So that's why I went to the other farm. But like you said, sometimes your plans change, and, it moves it into late season. I've had, do that to me as well. And that's kind of when I'll shoot them with the bow in the snow as well. But that's when I kind of like getting my muzzleloader out too. And
yeah, for sure.
And shooting them with a smoke pole.
So I guess my question for you is, could you get everybody on board? Like, I know you say you try to get them to 3 years old, but if everybody was on board to get them to, a better age structure, would it even be possible? Like if you had good neighbors, and you kind of work with each other.
Yeah, it is. So my family farm is 215 acres, and the neighbors around us, it's like, I don't know, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 neighbors around us. And in our deer camp, and to break it down for you, in our deer camp, we've got 11 guys that hunt 215 acres.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. So first of all, you've got to kind of fix it in your deer camp, where we're kind of at, so that's, the pressure's one thing, but in our deer camp, we've fixed the problem. The 2-year-olds, we're not really shooting 2-year-olds anymore. Everybody wants to shoot a 3-year-old. So we've fixed that problem in our deer camp. Now it's like around us, but one neighbor, their rule is it's got to be 6-point or better. That's it. If it's a 6-point or better, they're going to shoot it.
Yeah.
And then we have another neighbor that's kind of on the same board as we are. Actually, 2 neighbors that are on the same page as we are. It's like, well, we want to kill a bigger age structure. But, to the county south of us, they started a co-op. And all these landowners got together, and they've accumulated, mile sections of land, and they've got, a certain set of rules and everything. And those guys, they kill really good deer. 140s, 150s, 160s every year, with their bows and their anything. And, our gun season's 2 weeks long, 2.5 weeks long. No, 2 weeks long. So, and we can hunt with a rifle, so it's like, that hurts us, and it falls on November 15th every year. So it's the 15th through the 30th every single year. So it falls in the worst spot in the rut,
And that's just like Missouri. It's so close to us. And, you just go right across the board, and our hunting's so much better because of the lack of rifle season. So I think that plays a huge role in it, like you said. So
Yeah, and to answer your question, would everybody be on board? Yeah, I think it would take quite a bit of time, but I think the biggest thing is a lot of things that people don't want to do is they don't want to go like meet their neighbors. Like I think if you just go meet your neighbors and just talk to them, because you never know what they're doing. You know what I mean? They might be like, "Oh, we're shooting 130s and better, and they have to be 4 years old." We would have never known that if we wouldn't have went over their nest, and just go meet your neighbors, in my opinion, and just kind of feel them out. Like, hey, what do you guys, what's your goals for this year? How many does are you taking? Or what are you trying to kill with bucks? You know what I mean? And I think that's the first step, just to kind of feel everybody out.
yeah, I agree 100% with that, because I've heard all too often that, oh, I'm going to shoot him just because I know if I don't, my neighbors will.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
they've never even, talked to their neighbor.
Yeah.
If everyone's thinking, oh, I'm going to shoot him just because my neighbor will, then, like you said, then the deer will never get past.
My thing to that is, if you kill that deer because you think the neighbor's going to shoot it, is when you kill it, it's 100% dead.
Oh,
So it's like you're not even giving that deer another step to try to get to 3 years old or try to get to 4 years old. So
absolutely, yeah.
that's kind of where I'm at with it. So and I've fallen victim to it because I'm not around a lot more in the fall now as like I used to be in college and high school where I'd hunt every day. But I haven't even went over and met all my neighbors. There's 2 guys that I've never even talked to before, and I feel like I need to go do that. But I don't want to come across as the guy that's like, we need to shoot big deer. You know what I mean? Like, I want everybody to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to feel them out and say, hey, what's your thoughts on this? And, would you be willing to talk about doing a co-op? And this is what a co-op is,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's just the fight that we're fighting over here.
Yeah.
So, I think this is a good point where we can transition into number one of 3 of your big deer. What your first 200-inch deer? What was that deer? How old was he? What did he score? Kind of break him down to paint a picture for everybody.
Yeah. So, I believed him to be 8.5 when I shot him. He scored 201 and 7/8. He had 24 scoreable points, and basically he was just a mainframe 9-point, but he only had. He's basically just a huge 8-point and had a little tiny extra point, but as a mainframe 8-pointer, he went 171 with bases just shy of 8 inches, and he had tons of little stickers and kickers on his bases, and then a split brow, and then a couple off of his off the back of his bases too. So basically, he just had a lot going on with a lot of mass, and extremely wide too. So
that's a giant deer. That's a big 8-point too.
Yeah.
For being like a 170-inch 8-point.
Yeah, so basically, then he had just had a ton of little tiny kickers and stickers. Because when you say 171-inch 8-point, and he's got 24 points and only scores 202, only, yeah, you know what I mean. But
right,
he didn't have a lot of other big points, just a huge mainframe 8, basically.
So what year was that when you killed him?
That was in 2012.
And you were how old?
I would have been 21 then, and it was the first year I ever started filming, and the only advice I can ever give to someone, if you ever get into filming, make sure you have someone that is the most reliable person ever, because I was actually hunting 2 bucks that year, and the other one was running around 200 inches also, and he had like a 12-inch flyer coming off of G2, and was just this gigantic 10-point. I had 4 years of sheds, tons of history, obviously. Maybe it had been 6.5 that year. And I had this stand set up where it faces both directions down this cattle pasture draw, and it butts up the CRP, and it has crops on the hill. So I knew at some point this buck was going to be cruising through there. So I saved November 7th, my favorite day of the year. So I saved the stand for November 7th, and I text my buddy, asked him if he's up and everything like we always did. And he's like, "Oh no, I'm sick." So, and he knew how much I wanted to kill this deer, and that I waited till the perfect time to go in there. And so I didn't think much of it. I was like, "All right, yeah, no big deal." And so I go hunting, and I tried to film myself like we talked about earlier. And that's the day I figured out how hard it was, because he comes flying over the hill chasing the doe, and I kind of got a glimpse of him, and they ran into the CRP draw. So I stand up and I'm facing that way the entire. It was probably an hour that I'm facing that way, and I hear something behind me. And I look back, and here was another buck that I was hunting, but he was nowhere. He's probably a 170 maybe. The deer I would have shot every day of the week back then, but I was obviously more set on shooting that deer. But I was like, man, I really need to sit back down and pay attention both ways just so something doesn't sneak up on me. And I no more than sat back down, and probably 5 minutes later, the direction that he would have been facing, here comes the buck I was hunting. So, I grabbed the camera, I tried to film him basically through my shooting lane, and then there's a patch of brush, and then he comes into another shooting lane. So instead of just shooting him, I tried to film him through that shooting lane. He gets into the brush and walks straight away from me, and I never got a shot at him. So,
Oh my gosh.
a potential 200-inch deer just got his life saved because of the camera. So we come to find out my buddy basically stood me up to go ride dirt bikes on November 7th. I don't know why anyone would want to do that, but
So he was going to come out and film you. Was that what the story was?
we'd film every day that we could hunt for the entire season up until that point. I don't know if he got burned out earlier than I'm the type of person, I never get burned out. I can go every day and I never get burned out because that's what I live for.
Mm-hmm.
But, everyone's not wired like that. So I don't know if he was burned out or what the deal was, but no, he went and rode dirt bikes. And
Are you still friends with this guy to this day?
I wouldn't say we're good friends. That kind of, I don't know. It's one of those trust them as far as you can throw them type things. And ever since it happened, it just kind of, we've always had a bad taste in our mouth with each other. So, but I mean, I talk to him from time to time, so I wouldn't say that I dislike him. I obviously didn't hold a grudge or anything, but.
So you went out on November 7th, and he was supposed to film you, didn't film you, and you had one of the bucks that you were targeting come in, and you couldn't get a shot because you were trying to self-film.
Yeah, so basically took the wind out of my sails, and I said, you know what, I'm just I know this self-filming thing's way too hard, and until I get a reliable partner, I'm just going to hang up the camera for the year and just go back to hunting. So that's what I did, and I ended up killing the 201 and 7/8 on November 13th. So just a few short days later, I went into that hunt obviously a little bit discouraged because of the way my years went to this point, and I had my heart set on one of these two deer, and I kind of messed up. When I tried to self-film myself after he kind of went away, I rattled to him, and he came right back in, but he kind of knew something was up. So I knew my chances of killing him were probably getting slimmer as the day went on. So I kind of focused on this other deer after that. And so November 13th, I go in for an evening hunt. I'd hunted all morning and basically just wasn't seeing a lot of activity. It's kind of that lockdown stage of the rut, so
Yep.
I wasn't expecting to see a lot of deer. But basically, I just hunted all morning, and I just drove to this other spot. It was about an hour away. So just switched stands midday, basically. So I hop in, and
What made you switch stands? What was your thoughts that morning? What told you to go to that stand?
it's a stand that's really hard to get to of the morning. That's where I wanted to be all day, but I was a little timid of trying to get there of a morning because the crops are pretty close to the road, and I knew they'd be in it. So I just felt like I had a better chance of not scaring him, and I'd be able to keep hunting him. if I was a little more timid, because it's literally, it's an 80-acre property, but I'm basically hunting 5 acres of brush. It's basically 75 acres of crops and 5-acre patch of timber that butts up to the neighbors. That's tons of timber. So there's plenty of good land around it to make the spot good.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm literally focused on a tiny, tiny patch of timber. So I go in there with the strategy of, it's lockdown, stage of the rut. So if any of these does are coming out to feed in this field, hopefully if a buck's locked down with them, they'll bring the buck by also. And my strategy actually worked to a T. The doe came down the hill. There's this big bluff that goes up into the other guy's timber, and I could see him coming down the hill. He was coming towards me, and then the doe stopped at like 80 yards. And the buck started posturing, and, at this point I'm shaking like crazy because this was going to be the biggest deer in my life as he came in. And here comes this other buck, and they posture up to each other. They start fighting. And this other buck's probably a mid to high 60s type deer.
Okay.
And he just made him look like a baby. So, and he beat this other deer so bad that when he left, I honestly thought the deer was going to die. He couldn't even hardly walk, and he limped off, and I never even got another picture of that deer again, never seen him again. So I don't know if he did die. I don't know what happened, but
that's crazy.
So it kind of scared the doe. She ran back up the hill, and I'm like, well, that kind of ruined that. So that was at like 4. So at 5 o'clock, I heard something coming back down the hill, and I'm praying it's that doe. Sure enough, I see the doe, and I don't see him. I'm like, God, gosh dang it. And he was probably 30 yards behind her, and here he comes strolling over the hill. And honestly, by trail camera pictures, I didn't think that he was going to go 202 by any means. I guessed him to be, probably in the 180s.
Yep.
But it's just that type of deer that no picture does him justice.
Right. Yep.
So he comes down the hill, following the doe, and she's walking by. She walks right through my shooting lane, and I'm like, all right, this is perfect. So I got a good range on her. I knew the distance was 25 yards. He comes, and he gets like his front shoulder into basically his brisket into my shooting lane, so I start to draw back, and he stops. So I'm sitting here full draw for, it seemed like forever. It was probably only 20 or 30 seconds, but at this point, it's a huge deer. So I let down. No more than I let down, and he starts walking again. So I draw back, and luckily he stopped perfect in my shooting lane. I didn't have to stop him or anything. And so he gave me a 25-yard shot, and I can still remember my red Lebanon climbing up to this day. I mean, I just absolutely smoked him. He went probably 25, 30 yards and tipped over. I called my dad, and I told him I'd shot a big one. He's like, well, how big? I was like, I had no idea that it was going to be a 200-inch deer, but when I got in there, we were both like in awe of how many points he had that we, couldn't see by trail camera or anything like that. So
that's crazy. Now, did you have a lot of history with that deer, like years prior, or was that a deer that showed up that year and you decided to go after him then?
No, I actually had 2 sheds off of him, and I had pictures of him. See, he showed up, I believe, when he was 4.5. When I first recognized him, at least. And then I believe he was 8.5 when I shot him. So I had tons of pictures of him. But honestly, he was his biggest the year that I harvested him. So the year before that, I would have guessed him to be in the 160s. But after getting him on the ground, he obviously could have been bigger because he did not take a picture very well. But he was definitely his biggest that year at 8.5. So
did you have any encounters with that deer, or was it just all the sheds that you found in trail cam pictures?
Yeah, all the sheds and trail camera pictures. And for whatever reason, I only got one daylight pick, and I wouldn't even call it daylight. It was more or less just like a first thing at daylight, and that was on November 3rd. So it told me exactly where he was bedding, and he was going into that area that I seen him come out of when I harvested him. So it's basically just the intel I needed to hone in on him and figure out, okay, I need to start spending some time because he's actually might be killable this year. But other than that, I never got a single daylight picture of him, never seen him. He was a ghost, to say the least, but that doe is the only reason I ever killed him, to be honest with you. Just that doe didn't come by, there was no chance of killing that deer because he was not patternable and basically never moved in daylight.
So you
in
killed
my
him,
area, at least.
Yeah, so you killed him in a 5-acre patch of timber.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's kind of hard to believe, yeah, but most people think, you need hundreds of acres to potentially kill a deer of that magnitude, but in reality, you just need the right 5 acres, and if you set it up, obviously it helps if your neighbors are, obviously, as good as the ground is around it is the only reason you can ever kill a deer on that size of a property.
Yeah.
But I've actually killed 3 bucks on that property since 2012, and they've all been booners. So
You've killed 3 bucks on that farm, and they were all booners?
yeah, out of that little 5-acre patch. So
Wow.
It's definitely a little honey hole.
Now, does it matter with the crop rotation? I mean, when you killed all those deer, was it all corn? Was it beans? Like, what was the remedy?
It's normally better on corn use, and I think that might be because it seems like every year that it's in beans, the farmer will come in and he'll disc it up in the fall for whatever. I mean, I don't know, gives them a head start for the next year, but so then I have literally no food. So on years when he does that, obviously the hunting's not as good. But it's one of those spots where we might only hunt it like once or twice a year, just because it's not one of those spots you can hunt and get away with it. But unless we're hunting a specific buck. But I shot a 176 there 2 years ago, and that was the only time we hunted that farm. So.
Oh, really? Now, where's the 5 acres layout on the farm? Is it like, so if the road, let's say the road's like on the south end or whatever, is the timber on the north end? So is it all ag and then it goes in the timber on the back side of it? Like, how does that lay out?
Yeah, and you can actually see the timber from the road. So it's just not a very well-traveled road. But yeah, the north side is the road, the gravel road, and then it's a long field. So you're probably, when you get in the stand, you're probably only 150, 200 yards from the road. I mean, I can see someone in their vehicle when they drive by, but it just sets up so perfect. And the wind, I talked about the hill, and it's so flat behind you that for whatever reason, when the wind comes over that hill, it'll go back up, which is normally bad. But for whatever reason, it takes your scent completely away. You cannot get winded in that sand. I think that might be one of the reasons it's also so good,
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny you're saying that, like how your farm lays out, because I've got a similar situation here in Michigan. And my brother-in-law bought, he's a dairy farmer around here and around our area. He bought an 80-acre piece. Now the 80 acres runs north and south. There's a half-mile dirt road on the west end of it, and it's only got 1 acre of timber. And the timber lays in the northeast corner of it, and it's got wooded fence rows. And then the property to the east has a 20-acre patch of timber to the south, and then to the north of it, which butts up against my 1 acre, is all warm season grasses, and they don't bow hunt, to my knowledge. They do rifle hunt a little bit, but my wife and I have hunted it for 3 years now, And we've honestly only hunted it I'd probably say 6 times in the last 3 years. But the thing is I can get deer to 4 years old on that farm, and I don't know how. I do know how. It's because the deer in the last 2 years, they don't live on the farm. Obviously, there's 1 acre of timber. That's it, and it's just kind of a pass-through deal. But the hunters per square mile in that section there's not a lot. Now, the farm I was telling you about that I grew up on, that we've got 11 hunters on 250 acres, that's only 15 minutes away, and it's totally different. So the 1 acre lays in like heavy farm country where there's just little slivers of woods, My wife actually had like 130-inch deer 2 years ago with her rifle, and the gun wouldn't go off out in front of her.
Oh,
so, yeah, but I can get deer from 3 to 4 years old there, or 2.5 to 3.5. The last 3 years I've done it. So last year I went in and this last winter I went in and hinge cut that 1 acre. I didn't hinge cut the whole thing, but I left a lot of the mature stuff. I opened up the canopy and I made three beds in there. And so far through this spring and summer, it's a honey hole now for deer. They just flock to it. And so I'm really excited.
It's crazy how much of a difference a little improvement can make on a spot, no matter the size.
Yeah, it's got a little creek through it, so there's water in it all year. It doesn't matter how dry it is. There's always, because it runs off, it's a runoff from the fields, so there's water in it all year. And I actually put 3 stands on each point because it's a triangle shape. I put 3 stands on each point, and then I went in and I hinge cut a whole bunch of stuff, and I made trails by each of the stands. You know what I mean? So I think for rut, you get in there like an all-day sit or like a mid-morning to the rest of the day sit. Just sit it, and hopefully a doe brings a buck by. I think it'll be like a little rut hole, I'm hoping.
Oh, absolutely. And creating the hinge cutting, you're also going to have a bunch more does bedding in there, so the bucks are going to come cruising looking for the does. In any given part of the rut.
Yep. And this is my first year ever hinge cutting anything, and it was really crazy to see. It took them 2.5 weeks after I hinge cut to move in there and start bedding, and they bedded in the beds that I made. And I mean, there's like, it's a doe family group. I mean, there's like 6 beds, so it's probably does, and there's hair all over. But I did find 2 buck beds that I think are buck beds. One's on the northwest point of it, and then the other one is on the northeast point of it, and it's the lone bed. They're big beds, and you can just tell that they're setting up for, like, they're sitting there with the northwest wind, and they've got a barrier behind them, so they smell what they can't see, and they can see what they can't, see what they can't smell for any predators and everything. So I think there is bucks bedding in there, but this year will be the test. I don't have huge expectations for this year, but like 2 years from now, that's when I'm really hoping it's really good.
Yeah, definitely.
So anyway, got off on a little tangent there. Back to your story. So you killed your first 200-inch deer in 2012, you said. So
yep.
Fast forwarding to your next one, which would have been what year?
It would have been 2016.
2016. So take us through that. Now, was this a deer that you had a lot of history with, or was it just a random, guy that showed up?
No, I had 3 years of history with him. He showed up as, when we first recognized him, he was a 3-year-old with his split G3 and really long mane beams. So just a young deer. We obviously never had him on the hit list, but a buck that we were looking forward to see what he come into. The next year, we actually had an encounter with him, and he just walked down with a doe, so that's kind of where he got his name. My wife videoed him at like 50 yards, and he walked by, following that doe, and was probably, I don't know, in the mid-150s. And we were guessing him as a 4-year-old. Looking after we harvested him, looking back, he was either 3 or 4 then. We're not 100% sure on the age. So moving into the next season, we knew he was going to be a buck that we was going to try to target, but we get the cameras out, and he's nowhere to be found. So, we kind of just wrote him off. We just thought, okay, either something happened or he moved on to a different farm, or we didn't know what happened. So that's why the rut, and especially in Iowa, I don't know, I've never been on a rut hunt anywhere else, but what I can speak of from here, trail cameras are irrelevant during the rut for us, because we get, all too often, we have bucks come by. We'll have bucks come by all day long that we've never had a picture of. So, obviously you still get some that, you've got pictures of, your home bodies that never venture out too far. But so we actually are sitting in the stand, and this was November 5th of 2016, the first encounter we had with him. We're sitting in the stand, and I see this little buck, and he stands up and, kind of goes by at like 40 yards. And right behind him, posturing to him, is this buck, and he shows up, and I'm like, holy cow, this is an absolute giant.
Did you know it was that deer?
Not right away. And so I just start filming him, and I'm like, holy cow. Like, I'm thinking to myself, all I remember is looking at the camera screen thinking, because Taylor's hunting, I'm thinking, holy crap, she's going to kill a world-class animal. I didn't put two and two together of, how big he was. I just knew he was huge. So.
And what was his name? What did you say his name was?
Lockdown was his name. Ever since he was locked down with that doe, we just ended up calling him Lockdown.
Okay.
And so he comes in, and he was at 40 yards, but it's pretty thick in there, and you don't want to just completely clear out everything just because they're traveling through there so much. Most of the deer go right by you because there's a big crossing down the hill from you. So it just kind of, the terrain just kind of brings the deer right by you. So, but he came from the other direction and never went towards the crossing. He kind of almost went back the same way that he came from. I think he was just running that little buck off is what he was doing, and then went back with either with a doe or wherever he came from. So, she had him at 40 yards, didn't force a shot or anything. So, I was proud of her. And then we got to looking back at the footage, and I'm like, we didn't want to overguess him, but I'm like, holy cow, Taylor, you just almost killed. And I think I said a 190, playing it on the safe side. So then, it was November 10th, we finally had another good wind to go back in there, and here he comes from the crossing this time and chases a doe up the hill, the opposite direction from the stand again. But I got some pretty good video of him that time, and he never did even come real close. I think he was at probably 60 yards was maybe the closest he got. But looking back at the footage this time, we literally, paused the video and started counting stuff up. And actually, in my head, we came up with that he was going to score 210. So, we're freaking out because the biggest deer ever shot by a woman on video with archery tackles, I'm like, right around 210. So I'm like, you got a potential deer of the biggest deer ever shot by a woman on film with a bow, potentially. So we hunted him hard, and that same morning, Taylor had this buck come by that had split brows, and he was a 10-point with split brow, basically a 10-point split brow, so 12. And it just wasn't a buck she was going to pass. It was the biggest buck she's ever shot with her bow, and he came in at 166. So I told her I wasn't going to hunt Lockdown until, she either killed him or filled her tag on another buck. So it just wasn't a buck she was going to pass. So she shot him, and he only went probably 70 yards and crashed. And we kind of got down, got him taken care of, and then set the whole rest of the day. And when she shot her buck on November 10th, that was day number 9 of all day 6 in a row. So, our batteries were kind of running on E. And so, I don't know if that played any factor in whether I think she would have shot the buck every day of the week, but, especially being her biggest with her bow. But so she's like, all right, you're up now. We got to kill this deer. And I'm like, well, not really. I didn't really want to hunt him. I already had a 200 deer. But after she tagged out, obviously, all right, I'm up to bat. So, hunted the rest of that day, never seen him. And we came in the 12th. Came in the 12th of November was the next one we had. We could hunt him. And he was a no-show that day. We came back in on November 13th, and that was our last day of vacation. We kind of split it up because we were limited on vacation that year. So we took off like the beginning of the rut, and then during the lockdown period of the rut, we decided, okay, we're going to go back to work for 4 days and then take off like another 4 or 5 days. So it was our last day of our first part of our vacation. So, we went back in there, and it was really, really gusty winds that day. And we were sitting there, and for whatever reason, we were having backdrafts. And it's the only time that it's ever done that in that spot. But instead of just, staying there and hoping to get lucky, I'm like, we just got to get out of here and salvage our hunt. And, we'll start over, give them a little break, and then we'll start over once we get back to our vacation again. So going back to work for 4 days was brutal. We got a deer of a lifetime that we're wanting to be hunting, and we're sitting here at work.
Was anybody else hunting that deer? Like, were you on private land or public land, or did anybody have any idea about this deer?
Yeah, so I didn't find any of this out until after I shot him, but there was 2 neighbors that knew about him, and they were both hunting him like we were. And one of them actually got a shot, and he was traveling probably a mile, is where this other guy's, to the edge of this other guy's property from where we shot him. And he was actually getting pictures of him all summer. He'd moved to that farm, and that was where his home range was, basically. He just come over there and was chasing does during the rut where we were. And, we're sitting here thinking, okay, he's completely living in 40 acres of timber, because we were seeing him almost every time we went in there.
Yeah.
So, but little did we know, he actually got a shot out of him on November 4th, the day before we had our first encounter. And he said that he had him at like, I don't know, it was like 20 yards. And he drew back on him, and he heard something like in his jacket. So he ran out to 40, and he released the arrow and hit a twig. So it hit him, like it grazed the back of his head, basically. So the
really?
buck went out. Yeah, the buck went out to like 100 yards and sat there and shook his head for like 30 minutes, and he had no idea, obviously where he hit him. He just knew it wasn't good. So he tracked him and, figured out he was going to be fine. And then another landowner that's right next to us was hunting him pretty hard and had a couple encounters with him, but never got him in bow range. But
so were you guys on private?
On permission, yeah, private on permission. So, but so going into the second part of our vacation, our times, we're getting nervous at this point because our times went on down on being able to hunt him. He's getting into the the holiday season of Thanksgiving, where you get less and less time to hunt, and so we knew we had to get it done, or we were not going to harvest this buck, because there's no way you can hunt this farm late season. It's pretty much all timber. Your rut's really good, but that's basically your only opportunity. So with the rut winding down, we were going to spend pretty much every day. It was either that buck or nothing for me at that point. So November 18th, we went in there, and we got in there way early that day. And it was one of the coldest days of the entire rut.
This was a morning hunt?
Yeah, this was a morning hunt. And it was one of those spots where you could, there's cattle in there, so you could get away with murder getting to your stand, because I don't know if the cows covered your scent trail or they just thought, it was cows moving through because they did so often or what, but we could get away with, I learned so much from that because you could get away with so much more with your entry and exit routes, with cows being in there. So we head into the stand and get set up, and, the anticipation starts building because we've seen him 2 out of 4 times, and the one was only a quick hunt. So basically 2 out of 3 times. And sure enough, it was just breaking daylight. I looked at my phone and I went to Taylor and I was like, all right, it's deal time. It was literally probably 2 minutes after that. I look over and see this doe coming, and I'm like, holy crap, Taylor, he's right behind her. So this doe comes in facing us, and she's probably 15 yards away, and he's another 5-10 yards behind her. And she comes in and then takes a right turn, and that's going to be pushing to get on the downwind side of us. So he comes in and turns broadside, and I literally look over that doe, and she's like 5 steps from getting our wind. So he finally made it to my shooting lane, and I pulled back and I made a perfect shot, heart shot him, and he probably only went 40 yards, but it was so low light, and he went barely over the crest of the hill and died. So we sat there forever. I got down, looked at the arrow. It was, covered in blood. And I wanted to go right away and look for him, but obviously waiting was a better option. So we waited probably an hour, and it took up the blood trail, and there was blood everywhere. So it was a short track job, and he, like I said, only went 40 yards. And I walk up to him, and it's one of the craziest deer you've ever seen because he's such just like a basket rack deer because he wraps around so tight. His main beams don't, like most of them come out and kind of go forward. His come out and then basically wrap right back in. And he's a typical 14. And as a typical 14, he went 199 and 4/8 or something like that.
Wow.
Just shy of 200 as a typical 14. And then he had basically 6 other, he had kickers on his bases, and then he had an inch drop time, and then that same split G3 that he's always had. And then good brows, not crazy good mass. He has good mass, but it's not, outstanding. But just the time length and the time length is what gets you. But if you compare the 233 I shot this last year and the he scored 213. The 233 makes him look like a baby just because of how tight he wraps him. You almost have to turn him in every direction just to see every point and see how big he really is.
Yeah. So how many scoreable did you say you had?
20.
20 scoreable. Okay. Wow.
Yep. Typical
That's
14
such a big deer.
had.
So
Yeah.
you had 3 years of visual history with that deer then. So you encountered him for 3 years. 2 years prior, then you killed him on the 3rd year. Now,
yep.
Is that a farm that you guys still have? Is that a farm? Is it like a family farm or just like a friend, or how'd you guys get on the farm?
We basically only hunted that farm. The first year we hunted it was 2013, and that was 2016. So we only had it for a short period of time. We no longer can hunt it. It was just basically, my stepdad ran cattle on it.
Okay.
And we both did. We both had cattle on it. But I don't know. She just retired this last year, so it was one of those deals where they're going to be spending way more time out there, and it's their getaway. So
Yeah.
It's like they don't want a bunch of people. So it was one of those deals. We knew our time was coming to an end because he said, yeah, you can hunt it, but as soon as we're going to be down here all the time, it's our getaway. We don't want people around, and you can understand that. It's
sure.
Definitely, when you're on land, you want it to be just yours sometimes. So
yeah, for sure.
But knowing that our time was going down, we were glad that, it ended the way it did, because if we would have never harvested him, we've been sick to our stomachs, never being able to hunt them again.
So at this point, walking up on this deer, this is your second 200-inch deer. Now you probably knew it was gonna be real close when you were walking up on him. What are you thinking? Like, does that, do you lose any excitement, or are you just excited, or what was your emotions like?
My emotions were, to me, man, it's always bittersweet when you put so much time and effort into one animal and then you harvest them. I mean, you're excited, but at the same time, you're almost like sad that the chase is over with, because you've invested every thought into how are you going to get it done. And then when you finally do, it's almost surreal. It just doesn't even seem, it doesn't seem real.
Right.
But then it sinks in, and then you're happy, but not at the same time. I don't even know how to explain it.
Yeah. It's just crazy. I'm trying to process everything right now as I'm thinking about it. Now, I've watched this hunt, so if anybody wants to see this hunt, it's on YouTube on Midwest Whitetails. Was it on Chasing November, or was it just on their Midwest Whitetail show?
It was on both. It's on Midwest Whitetail, the regular show, and on Chasing November. So
yeah, and I recommend whoever is listening to this to go and watch Caleb and his wife hunt on these episodes, because they both shoot some giant deer on there, and it's really cool to watch them hunt. But yeah, so this deer locked down, it's on there. Go look at it. It's a really cool hunt. And so the word has to get out around town. Like, people are going to know about this. So what starts happening to you once, are people obviously doing the jealous thing, or are people very happy for you, or are you know what I mean? Like, what was the word around town about you and killing these big deer?
Oh, I mean, before I ever started filming, everybody thought I was a poacher. That's the funny part about it. And I wouldn't say that it's what got me into filming, but I've always wanted to film. I grew up watching all the hunting shows. I've always wanted to do it, and I just never had the right partner to do it with. So once I did, that's what I wanted to do. But when I started killing big deer on film, and everybody, they were more like, okay, yeah, this guy's for real. He didn't actually poaching the deer. He just puts a lot of time into it. But you still now have people that are both ways. There's always jealous people no matter what you do, but you have to take it with a grain of salt. There's going to be people that are happy for you. There's going to be people that are jealous, and say, you can just tell when you come up to someone, and if you're talking about hunting, and you ask them what they shot, and if they didn't have luck, and you show them a picture of the one you shot. There's only certain people like that, but it kind of takes the fun out of it when people are like that, because it doesn't matter what anybody shoots. I'm always pumped for them. I mean, that's what hunting's all about. It's not about chasing the biggest inches, or it's about your journey and what led you to that harvest and the memories made along the way. I mean, that's what it's all about for me, at least.
Yeah, you nailed it, man. I mean, I feel the same way you do, and in our deer camp we've got 11 guys. I want to see somebody in our camp kill those deer. Like, not that I'm being selfish or anything, but I'd rather see our guys kill it than anybody else. That's
right,
just
that's
the fun part about it. Going back to camp, and there's bucks on the buck pole, so that's the part of hunting in deer camp, the camaraderie. That's what I love about it, and all the work. Honestly, the preparation in the summer, I almost am starting to like that more than killing the animals. I love the chase, and like you said earlier, I like this. You're like, I like to grow deer up, and now that can get some deer a little bit older, like it's starting to get a little more addicting in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. When you can, see them grow from year to year, it's very addictive, because it almost gets to the point where you almost want to see them one more year. But then, if you go out hunting and never have a deer to hunt, then you're obviously not having fun. So
yeah, and you said 2 of your 200-inch deer, they were heavily influenced by does. They were both locked on does. Now, a lot of the deer that you kill, are they are you killing a majority of your deer in the rut and, on does?
No, not really. Honestly, I kill more cruising bucks probably than I do. I think, there's been these two and maybe one or two others have been on does, but as far as the majority of them, I'd say have been just cruising. Like, I've got a few stands that I get in. I just want to see as far as I can, and I'm going to be on the fringe. I'm not going to get into the good stuff. I'm going to stand back on the fringe where I can get to it easy. I can get out of it easy, but I can see so far that, okay, if I see a buck come out that I want to try and harvest, I'll rattle at him or whatever. And if you're in a spot where they can't see what's there, 9 times out of 10, if you can spark their attention, they're going to be on their way if they don't have a doe with them.
Right. Now, what are you looking for? Because you as a hunter, you're probably thinking, I want to get in these areas to catch a cruising buck, not necessarily a buck with a doe. That's just happened a couple times for you. Now, what are you looking for on your pieces of ground? Is there topography? Like, what are you looking for to get your stands in?
Yeah, and it all comes back to the summer scouting, and actually I did a lot of my scouting. I wouldn't even say it right before shed season, honestly, because the trails are still prevalent. You can see exactly what's been going on for that year. The scrapes are still there, the rubs. But for the most part, when I'm going out, I'm looking for doe bedding areas. If I can get on the downwind side of a doe bedding area, that has been where we've had our most success. Because like I said, a lot of the bucks we're hunting, we're not going to pressure them early season. If they're coming to a clover plot early season, we'll hunt them on the right wind. But early season, we kind of play it a little more I'm one of those, like, I'm really gung-ho during the rut, but like early season, I'll kind of play it safe. If they're on a good pattern, we'll hunt them. But until they get to the pre-rut or into the rut, that's when I'll start making bigger moves. I'm going to hunt the fringes, and then when it doesn't matter at that point, I'm going to start making moves. People, kind of will stay back and never get into the good part of their farm, and that can work too. Everybody has their own strategy. I'm just a little more aggressive than like say a Bill Winke. He's got his 1,000 acres, or he's got his piece of land, and he's gonna hunt the fringes of it more often than not, as opposed to where I'm gonna, as soon as I get to the right period, I might scare a few deer, and I know that going into it, but I'm gonna be really aggressive.
Okay. Now, are you going in with a stand on your back to hang and hunt there, or are you setting that stand up previous, early season, before season, even if knowing that this is a spot that I want to be aggressive in?
It goes both ways. We try to have as many stands up as possible in places we think are going to be good. And I do that all the time, and it seems like we get to hunting a certain buck and we never hit half the stand, but it's still good having them up just for, in case. But a lot of times I'll get to playing like a chess match with one buck, and then we'll do hanging hunts as well. But for the majority of the time, I'd rather have a stand up, just because when you're already carrying the camera equipment and your bows and everything, it's just so much that if you add 2 stands with it, and my wife's like 120 pounds soaking wet, so trying to pack in more stands and sticks and all that, so it's a chore, so we try to have everything ready to go ahead of time, but we end up hanging and hunting probably 4 or 5 times a year per sure.
Okay. Yeah. So now, 2016, you kill your second 200-inch deer. Now, take us into 2017. Last year, you kill another, it was a 233, correct?
Yeah, 233.
So let's start. Did you have history with this deer before, last season?
I didn't think I did until after harvesting the buck. And it sounds weird saying that, but okay, so this is a new property that I picked up this year. I actually didn't even ask for permission. I went in. My stepdad rents this guy's farm, and it's not even a deer hunting farm. It's just all tillable, and he knew that I was big into hunting, and he's from Florida, so he put in for a disabled tag this year, and he was lucky enough to draw, and he knew I was big into hunting, so he went to my stepdad and asked if I was willing to take him hunting, and I said, yeah, absolutely, I'd love to take you hunting. And so he showed me this farm that they owned that was actually not even that far from the one my stepdad rents. And he's like, go in there, set it up however you want, and then we'll go hunting. And I was like, all right, yeah, that sounds good. So I put in a little food plot for him and put a blind up. And I ended up, and what I didn't mention, the disability that he has is that Lou Gehrig's disease. And he was like, he's like the 1 percentile that lives for way longer than, he's on year 20 of having it, and he's like the 1% that actually, lives longer than like a really short amount of time. So, but anyway, he came up for the disabled season, and he was able to shoot his biggest buck ever, and he had a great time, really hit it off, and by the end of it, he was like, well, would you be interested in hunting this farm? And I was like, well, absolutely. If you were offering, I would be more than glad to hunt it. So we really started putting the work in, got 4 different stands hung, got a couple blinds set up.
What's the farm breakdown like?
That's a good question. It's 100 acres of crops and 60 acres of brush. So it's actually the biggest farm that we have permission on now. It's 160 acres, and that's the biggest farm we have right now. So
when you say brush, like what does that consist of?
And that's what makes this farm really hard to hunt, because it's mostly like hedge and cedars. There's not really any big trees on it, but I was lucky enough to find, a few bigger trees, and the one I actually killed the buck out of is a cedar tree, but it just happened to be, it's the biggest cedar tree I've ever seen, honestly.
Yeah, because in Iowa, there's not very big cedar trees.
No, not at all. Absolutely not. Like, they don't, most of the time they're, like as big around as your arm. So they might look good in theory because they got a bunch of cover, but by the time you get it to where you can actually, cut your way up and get a stand in there, then there's absolutely no cover. So you stick out like a sore thumb. But this one actually, was not the case. But this particular stand, I knew it was going to be good, but I didn't realize it was going to be this good. So,
and you don't have any idea this buck is even on the earth right now, right? Or do you?
No, and see, no, not at all. I'd heard about the deer after. Okay, so basically, to make a long story short, my buddy and I were driving around after season. This was a long time ago, probably 2012, I want to say, and the buck would have been 3 years old then. And we pulled in this driveway to turn around, and he spots a shed out there, so he goes and picks it up, and it's actually the gate entrance to the farm I'm hunting now, and it's this 6.86-inch shed, and I'm like, holy cow,
Wow.
So it has literally no mass. It's for sure, a 3-year-old shed looking back, and then putting all the pieces together after harvesting, and if anyone wants to watch the episode of Midwest Whitetail, it's on there too, that it breaks it down, step by step of all the history and every piece along the way of stuff that I found out afterwards. But basically, we think he was 9.5 when I actually harvested him. And, quite a few of the neighbors were generous enough to, share trail camera videos and pictures and whatnot. But, so going into this year, we had no idea this buck was alive, but he ended up showing up on a scrape on October 28th was the first picture we got of him. So I think I checked it. It would have been early November when I actually, checked the camera, and I'm like, my jaw hit the ground. I'm like, holy smokes. So at that point, we started our vacation on I think it was November 3rd this last year, 3rd or 4th, and my number one target buck going into the rut, he got shot like 3 days before that. So we were really scrambling to try and figure out, what deer we were wanting to hunt at this point. So when we got pictures of him, it was pretty obvious, but my stepbrother actually seen him, my brother-in-law actually seen him November 5th. He was just driving down the road coming home from work and seen him go into the property I was hunting, and he literally described him to a T, and I didn't think anybody knew about the deer at this point. So he tells me what deer it is, and I'm like, yeah, we're going to start hunting him. So hunted and never seen him. And then finally on November 9th, we're sitting there, and my wife's actually hunting. I wanted her to shoot this buck more than anything, and just like the other one. So we're sitting there, and this management buck comes in, and we've been this last year, losing our best farm and then picking up this farm, trying to learn everything we can about it. And then we had one of the most struggling years that we've had. We had so many encounters, we just weren't getting deer on the ground. So we're sitting there, and it's freezing cold. I think it's, the temperature's in the teens, and we got like a 25 mile an hour north wind blowing right in our face. So we're brutally cold at this point. And it was like 9 o'clock in the morning, and this management buck comes by that we were wanting to take off the property. So my wife was, ready to shoot him, and stands up and tries to draw our bow back. And we uphill pound is like crazy this year because, obviously better penetration, all that good stuff. So in the yard, she pulled it back probably 15 times or more per day, and it was no problem. But when you add the amount of clothes we were wearing and the adrenaline and, the small surface of the stand, she wasn't able to pull her bow back. So she was absolutely, embarrassed, because it's on film, and not happy with herself. So we ended up switching places, and I was like, let's just go back to the house and sight, or put your bow down a few pounds, and we'll get it sighted in good, and we'll head back out here. And she's like, no, just, you start hunting, we'll get it taken care of tomorrow. I'm like, all right. So we basically just switched off, and it was getting down to last light, and I remember looking at my phone, and it was, we'd seen a few small bucks and some does throughout the day, but the activity just wasn't there for what, November 9th is supposed to be. So we were kind of discouraged, honestly. And I looked at my phone, and I think it was like 5:10 or 5:15. And I'm like, at this point, we are froze through. And I'm like, only 15 more minutes. It was almost one of those deals where, like, you're almost ready to get out of the stand because you're so cold. And so about 10 minutes went by. It was like 5 minutes before the end of legal shooting time. 5:24 to be exact. I remember looking back at the footage, but I just hear something in the corn. It was still standing corn at that point. And his rack is so big. You can it sounds like a bulldozer coming through the corn. And I'm like, what in the world is that noise? So I'm looking, nothing. And it kind of stops for a little bit. So, we just thought, oh, it's going to be another little buck because we'd seen so many that day. And out of the corner of my eye, I see him, and I look over, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's him, So my wife gets on him with the camera. And the thing I remember the most is my hands were so cold. I tried to clip onto my loop, and I missed like 3 times because I couldn't feel my fingers. And
Pete, how far is he away right now when he stepped out?
he was probably 30 yards when he first came into my shooting lane. He was kind of working at an angle, so I got this 20-yard shooting lane to shoot into. But like I said, it's like hedge pasterns, feeders, and it's a really open spot in them. So I had this huge shooting lane. And, well, I should have done was slow the game down a little bit, but I didn't. But anyway, he ends up stopping it. Like, I stopped him at 24 yards, and I aimed basically low heart, expecting to duck a little bit because so many times before I've had him do it, and he didn't even flinch. So I knew in my head it was a low hit, but I felt like it was still going to clip the bottom of the heart. And we looked and looked and basically looked for 4 days and couldn't find him. But we were fortunate enough to, and I say fortunate, all the meat goes to waste and everything. So it's not any situation you ever want to be in. But we did end up finding the buck later in the year. But definitely not one of my better shots. But as you can tell in the video, if he would have ducked any at all, I would have smoked him and he would only went 40 yards. But in my mind, where I was aiming was still going to kill him, even if he didn't duck. Well, what I didn't take into consideration was how high we were in the tree. So the angle coming down on him, the entry is fine, but where it would come out would be, just clipping the heart. So, which was a long process in killing him, which, is never something you want to do. You have so much respect for the animals, but as bow hunters, it's something we're faced with every time we release an arrow, that it could potentially happen. But you never want it to happen to you, but it's one of those things that can happen.
Yeah. So to recap real quick, so your wife was hunting, and she had a good management buck come in that you guys want to take out, and she couldn't get her bow back. You guys upped her poundage, and it was real cold, and she just couldn't get her bow back. It's happened to a lot of people. It's happened to everybody, actually, at one point or another.
Yeah, it's happened to me before, too, yeah, when you first started hunting them. But we've been hunting long enough, it probably shouldn't have happened, but, I mean, that's the thing. You can hunt forever, and there's always something you're going to pick up every year, and that's what we love about it.
So, now, when you guys switched, were you in that tree when she had the encounter with that deer and you just switched stands?
Yeah, we were basically, I went from cameraman stand to the hunter stand and vice versa. So we basically switched spots.
Okay.
I actually had my bow at the base of the tree, so just in case, November 9th, you potentially could double up. You never know. So
yeah,
we both brought our bows. But
okay. So then, and that buck comes out and you hit him low. So now, when you tracked him for 4 days, did you ever see him again? Did you ever pick him up on trail cam, or did you just think, he went and got in a ditch or anything and just kind of maybe, infection set in and just kind of maybe died, or, what was your thoughts there?
Yeah. So after not being able to find him, I put trail cameras up. It seemed like on every tree. I had on 160 acres. I want to say like 14 or 15 cameras up. Just because if he was back, I wanted to know. So, and we went through and checked all the cameras, and he was on one of them. And this was 5 days after shooting him. So in our mind, we're thinking, we're out of the woods. He's going to be perfectly fine, and we'll have another chance to try and get back on him. But I ended up talking to several, bigger names in the hunting industry and just getting their opinion on it. And they all said the same thing, that I'm not necessarily out of the woods yet, because most of the time infection sets in within 7 to 10 days. So if infection, with where the shot was right around the heart, if infection sets in at all, it can definitely kill him. And they hit the nail on the head there, because he completely, after 5 days, was the last trail camera picture we ever got of him. The last any of the neighbors had seen him, anybody had seen him. So we started the search again, and I mean, we looked and finally found him in a creek about a half a mile from where I'd shot him. So basically, we had searched everywhere but there when we found him. So it's kind of a funny story because when I actually found him, I looked down and I see this buck laying in the creek, and I'd been looking for so long. When I looked down, I'm like, holy crap, that's a big deer. And it didn't even sink in right away that, holy crap, that's him, you know?
Right.
So
Wow.
it was just such a, you know, and I'd lost so much sleep over, you know, trying to think, okay, where could he be, you know? And it really consumed my every thought at that point.
Yeah, and when did you end up finding him? Was it after winter?
Yeah, it was clear. I ended up finding him. It was in February when I found him, so a long time after shooting him. I can tell you, I can't even tell you how many hours I put into trying to find him. Well, me and one of my buddies and then my wife, we literally looked until we thought, okay, we're not going to find him several times, but we never gave up. And then, we were finally at least able to get some closure. It's never the way you want the story to end or anything like that, but at least we knew we weren't going to be hunting him anymore. So.
Yeah, that's a wild story, man. And like you said, that story, that buck is called the Goat, right? You guys named him the Goat?
Yeah. Yep, because I'm going to assume that'll be the greatest buck of all time that I'll ever shoot. But I said that about Lockdown too, so we'll see.
Yeah, and so that one's on Midwest Whitetail as well. And what did he end up scoring again? Was it 233?
Yep, 233 and some change is what he went.
Wow, that's awesome, man. I mean, you've got to experience a 200-inch deer 3 times. That's pretty crazy. You're not even 30 years old yet. That's awesome.
It really, I mean, it's crazy to think about, but I've just been lucky, honestly. I heard someone say one time that how hard is it to kill a 200-inch deer? And he said, well, it's not that hard. And they kind of looked at him funny. And he said, it's way harder to find a 200-inch deer than it is to kill it. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. They're all a deer, but not very many of them have the potential to be a 200-inch deer.
Yeah.
So,
and it's funny you say that too, because I was talking to Mark Drury one time, and he was talking about how and Mark Drury is just a big buck killer. I mean, the man is a machine.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And and he was kind of saying stuff about find the biggest deer you have. It's not if you're in Michigan and the biggest deer you have is a 2.5-year-old 115-inch deer, do whatever you can to kill that deer. You can't hunt a 200-inch deer if you don't have it. You can't hunt a 140-inch deer if you don't have it. And that really registered in me because on our farm here, we've never had a 140-inch deer. So why would I be holding out for a 140-inch deer when we just don't have one? Now when the day comes that if we ever do have one, then for sure, yes, I'm definitely going to try to hold out for that and kill him.
For sure, yeah. If you're not going to have any fun if you're hunting a buck that doesn't exist. You're setting your expectations way unrealistic.
Right.
And I've shot, like you said, I've shot 3 200-inch deer, but I'll still go out and shoot any mature buck that mature buck that I see. Most, occasionally I'll give some the pass, whether they went downhill from last year, if it's a drought year or whatever the circumstance may be. But most times when I go out, if I'm targeting a specific buck or, I may hold out, but 9 times out of 10, if I have a mature buck that I have history with come by, I'm going to put an arrow in him. So
yeah, and that's a good transition to the last question I want to ask you here. I mean, we're running up on time here. What are you going into the year like? If you don't, let's say you don't have a deer that you're particular really, I mean, I shouldn't say that. You probably have a deer every year that you're really trying to hone in on, but what's your criteria? I mean, is it age? Is it antlers? What is your criteria? What are you trying to kill?
Yeah, it's absolutely age. and every farm that we hunt's different. I can't say that every farm that I have we're going to try and get the deer to 5.5 because that would be a lie. On our farm, 100%, we try to get every buck to 5.5. But a lot of the farms we have permission on, trying to get them to 5.5 is almost sometimes unrealistic because, you know, there's a lot of shotgun pressure around them. And just the simple fact that you never know how long you're going to be able to hunt that farm. Anything could happen. The farmer could sell it. It could be your last year to hunt it any year. So I'm not saying we're going to go and shoot a 3.5-year-old deer or anything like that, but 9 times out of 10, if it's a buck that you're happy with shooting, we're going to shoot him if he's on any of those farms. So I guess to answer your question, our strategy going into every year is going to be based off age most of the time, but you know, there's a few situations where, you know, if he's obviously a giant, you're going to hunt him. So
basically the way I kind of look at it when I go in each year is I look at the top 10% of the bucks that are on my farm, and that might be a 3.5-year-old or that might be a 2.5-year-old. I'm just trying to find the biggest deer that I can, and I say the biggest deer, the oldest deer I can find, and that's the one I'm going to go after. I've shot a couple 3.5-year-olds here in Michigan, and now I've made that jump. You know, it kind of goes in steps. Now I really want to hone in on. I really want to kill a 4-year-old, but if a 3-year-old really makes me happy, and I see that deer, and I'm like, man, I really like that deer, then that's kind of the deciding factor for me if I'm going to kill that deer or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing that I've always told my wife whenever we first got into hunting. I was like, you know, your style of hunting might be different than mine, and we're hunting together. If you see a deer that you want to shoot, I'm never going to tell you don't shoot that deer. If it makes you happy at the end of the day, that's what hunting's all about.
Yep, and I say the same thing to my wife and to my friends and to people that I meet, you know, and they ask the same question, and it's like, well, if that deer makes you happy, go kill that deer. You know, if that's what's gonna
100%, yeah.
You know, and that's what that's why hunting's fun. You know,
everybody has their own strategy and what makes them happy. So that's what makes it fun for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. Well, cool, man. We're coming up on, you know, almost 2 hours here, and I just can't tell you enough or thank you enough and tell you I appreciate you coming on here and telling your story. And it's a really cool story, and you know, and you've done some really cool things and really big things, you and your wife both, and I just want to get your story out there.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and I could talk about deer all day, so that's no problem at all, man.
Well, you know, it was kind of difficult for us to get our schedules to line up, but I think we should probably do this again sometime and maybe just hone in on, you know, tactics or, you know, breaking a farm down or farm management. Maybe we'll do that for another one here, maybe after this fall, and maybe, heck, you might even kill another 200-inch deer. So if we do that, then we'll just have to talk about another 200-inch deer.
I can only wish, but I don't think that was going to happen. But yeah, we'll definitely have to talk again. That was fun, so I'm looking forward to doing it again.
Cool, man. Well, I appreciate it, and thanks for coming on here. And well, actually, what I do want to ask you is, where can everybody see, you know, your hunts and everything, and on your social media pages and Midwest Whitetail, where can everybody go to see what you're doing?
Yeah, so Caleb Byers 7 is my Instagram page, and that's basically where I'll, you know, any bucks that we'll be hunting, I'll put them on there, and you can really follow along with our journey mostly through that. But then obviously, you know, the updates on Midwest Whitetail, any footage that we have will be on there. So yeah, I mean, I hope everybody enjoys following along as much as we enjoy filming. So we can't wait for this upcoming season. I think every day we tell each other, man, is it October yet? So looking forward to it, that's for sure.
Well, cool, man. Again, thank you for coming on, and we'll catch up with you again sometime soon.
Yeah, that sounds great.
And there it is, Caleb Byers. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story and everything you and your wife have been doing. And everybody, thanks for listening and downloading. I can't thank everybody enough for the support. Again, if you could go to iTunes and leave some feedback and leave a 5-star rating, that'd be great. And go find our Facebook and Instagram at The Fall Podcast, and stay up to date with everything that I'm doing and everything that's going on in the podcast. And I also want everybody to know you can listen to this podcast on iTunes right here, or if you have an Android, you can download it on Google Play. And also you can find it on the Fall Podcast YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, search the Fall Podcast, and they're all right there, so you can listen to them right on YouTube. And with that being said, don't forget, next Wednesday we got an all-new episode right here on the Fall Podcast.